Chewing gum can earn you a fine, uttering a forbidden word might land you in jail, and graffiti could lead to exile. Such strict measures do not belong to a dystopian world, but are part of Singapore's reality. This tiny island nation has, in less than a generation, evolved from an impoverished, unsanitary outpost into one of the wealthiest and safest countries globally. A government minister here commands an annual salary of around $1,500,000, yet a car can be as expensive as an apartment. About 1 in 8 residents is a millionaire, but stray even slightly from the rules and you risk becoming a violator. It raises the question, are we truly approaching some ideal future? Or are we living in a carefully controlled digital prison, masked with the friendly smile? Just 60 years ago, Singapore was a struggling, densely populated island with no natural resources, recently expelled from Malaysia. Unemployment stood at 14%. Half the population was illiterate, and a third dwelled in impoverished slums. The nation lacked its own water sources and natural riches. Experts doubted its survival, predicting only a few years of existence for the fragile state. Yet, a remarkable transformation unfolded. Over that short span, the country's GDP skyrocketed from a modest $970 million to over $550 billion, a 500-fold increase. To put that into perspective, Russia's economy during the same period grew roughly 8 times, and the United States saw a 17-fold expansion. Today, the average monthly income surpasses $5,000, 10 times higher than in Russia. Its infrastructure continually impresses even the most seasoned travelers. Changi Airport, featuring a 40-meter indoor waterfall, butterfly gardens, and free cinemas, has been recognized as the best airport worldwide 10 times. The city's metro, with 145 stations, provides easy access to any area without leaving the underground. Some stations even offer free tennis tables for passengers. Safety in Singapore is equally remarkable. It is a place where leaving a smartphone on a cafe table for 15 minutes is safe, and women can walk alone at night through any neighborhood without fear. Singapore maintains its position among the world's least corrupt countries, a feat achieved through a stark combination of severe punishments and high salaries for public officials. Ministers earn up to $1,500,000 annually, more than top executives of major corporations, eliminating temptations for bribes and attracting brilliant minds into civil service. The nation's education system ranks among the best worldwide, with students consistently excelling in mathematics, science, and reading in international comparisons. Healthcare is equally excellent, with the average life expectancy exceeding 84 years, one of the highest globally. The business environment in Singapore is ideal for entrepreneurs. Registering a company takes only a day, and tax rates are among the lowest. Corporate tax stands at 17%, while bureaucracy remains minimal. Consequently, the city-state hosts over 7,000 multinational corporations, serves as a regional headquarters for countless firms, and ranks second only to the United States in foreign direct investment. The result is clear. 1 in 8 Singaporeans is a millionaire. Singapore's per capita GDP surpasses $72,000, outpacing nations like the United States, Germany, and Japan. Its sovereign wealth funds manage assets exceeding $1,800,000,000, 3 times the country's annual gross domestic product. Behind this shimmering image, however, lies a less attractive reality. To truly grasp the Singapore phenomenon, it is essential to look beneath the polished surface of its economic miracle and examine its social and political constraints. Freedom of speech in Singapore is severely restricted. For instance, in the year 2020, a blogger named Rowan Gurn was sentenced to jail and fined $42,000 for criticizing the Prime Minister on Facebook. Similarly, in 2018, activist Jalavin was detained for 10 days, following a post that highlighted systemic injustices within the justice system. Legislation in Singapore includes vague provisions concerning the undermining of government trust, which authorities interpret broadly to suppress dissent. In 2019, a law against fake news was enacted, granting officials extensive powers to block any content deemed false or misleading. The country's media landscape also reflects tight control. Most major outlets are state-owned, leaving virtually no room for independent journalism. According to the Reporters Without Borders World Press Freedom Index, Singapore ranks 144th, positioned between Myanmar and South Sudan, showing significant restrictions on press freedom. Foreign publications, including notable outlets like The Economist and The New York Times, face repeated restrictions when they publish critical reports, further illustrating the fragile state of press independence. Privacy in Singapore is also a relative concept. With an estimated 18 surveillance cameras for every 1,000 residents, one of the highest densities worldwide, by 2026 the number is projected to reach 200,000 cameras. This equates to roughly one camera for every 30 residents. Facial recognition technology is actively deployed, and authorities have access to user data upon their first request, reflecting the extensive reach of state surveillance. The country enforces approximately 8,000 different regulations covering all facets of daily life. Violations as minor as missing a trash bin can result in a fine of $500, and forgetting to flush in a public restroom may incur a fine of $150. Feeding pigeons can lead to a penalty of $500, while smoking in unauthorized areas costs $300. Perhaps the most notorious ban is on chewing gum. Since 1992, the import, sale, and even possession of chewing gum have been prohibited, with fines reaching up to $70,000. It was only in 2004 that pharmacies were allowed to sell gum with a doctor's prescription. Alarmingly, corporal punishment persists as a punitive measure. Caning is used for over 30 offenses, including vandalism and indecent behavior. In 1994, American Michael Fay was sentenced to caning for graffiti, a procedure that is extraordinarily painful. A cane soaked in water, the weight increasing its impact, strikes the skin until it bleeds after a single blow. The use of the death penalty further exemplifies Singapore's strict and often harsh criminal justice system. In 2022, 11 people were executed solely for drug crimes. Officially, Singapore claims to be a parliamentary democracy. However, in reality, it operates as a de facto one-party state. The People's Action Party, which has held power since independence, maintains its dominance through extensive control over political life and institutions, effectively limiting genuine political competition for over 6 decades. Founded by Leong Yu, Singapore was under his firm control for over 3 decades, after which power transitioned to close associates. In 2004, his son assumed the role of prime minister. The nation's parliament, comprising 93 seats, includes only 10 held by opposition parties, with key government roles occupied mainly by members of the ruling party or loyal elites. Despite such tight control, most Singaporeans do not protest these restrictions. Remarkably, over 80% of the population supports the current government, confident that the country is heading in the right direction. The reason is straightforward. Stability and economic prosperity have proven to be more valuable than abstract political freedoms. Over the past 60 years, the everyday lives of Singaporeans have undergone a dramatic transformation. From impoverished beginnings, they have become middle-class citizens with comfortable incomes, their own apartments, and access to world-class education and healthcare. For those who remember the hardships during Singapore's early independence, this level of prosperity feels nothing short of miraculous. Against this backdrop of progress, restrictions on free speech are seen as a small price to maintain economic security. Many residents note that the strict legal environment fosters an atmosphere of safety and freedom. People can walk freely day and night. Children confidently use public transportation alone, and corruption in dealings with government agencies is practically non-existent. Such conditions generate a unique sense of liberty that offsets limitations elsewhere. Trust in the Singaporean government ranks among the highest worldwide. Around 76% of citizens express confidence in their authorities, 3 times the global average. This high level of trust stems from decades of continuous economic growth combined with social stability. Singapore's government is not a distant bureaucratic entity. It functions as an effective system that consistently enhances citizens' quality of life. Society is deeply rooted in discipline and collective responsibility, contrasting sharply with Western individualism. In Singapore, societal interests tend to take precedence over individual ones. From early childhood, students learn respect for rules through strict discipline, mandatory uniforms, structured schedules, and even classroom cleaning. These practices instill an understanding that rules are vital for harmonious coexistence, not just external constraints. While Singapore's model of economic freedom paired with political restrictions is not entirely unique, similar approaches exist in Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and, to some extent, China. No other system functions with comparable success. Its standard of living rivals that of Switzerland, yet it is supported by much more rigorous social norms. This distinction reflects fundamental cultural differences between Western and Asian traditions, demonstrating how deeply ingrained societal values shape the effective governance and prosperity of the nation. While Western democracies rely on systems of checks and balances, East Asian nations favor a strong, centralized government as the bedrock of stability and prosperity. Significantly, nearly 91% of Singaporeans own their homes, a figure considerably higher than in any Western nation. This success stems from an effective and carefully managed state housing program, which has become one of the most remarkable social initiatives in history. The government diligently oversees the ethnic composition of residential complexes, ensuring approximately 74% are Chinese, 13% Malay, 9% Indian, and 3% others. This strategic approach helps prevent segregation and fosters interethnic harmony. Yet, a pressing question remains. How sustainable is the Singapore model over the long term? History offers examples of authoritarian regimes that achieved economic growth only to encounter crises later, such as Spain under Franco, Chile under Pinochet, and South Korea in the 70s. All eventually transitioned toward democracy. Although Singapore has so far defied this pattern, several looming challenges threaten its stability. First is the country's deep reliance on global interconnectedness. It imports about 90% of its food and all essential resources, with exports and re-exports reaching roughly 200% of its gross domestic product, a most unusual feat. While such a high dependence on free trade has fueled economic success, the emergence of protectionism, trade conflicts, and deglobalization poses significant risks. The ongoing tensions between the United States and China, coupled with the threat of military conflicts, threaten to disrupt global supply chains and undermine the globalization-driven growth model. The second challenge is rising social inequality. Singapore exhibits one of the highest Gini coefficients among developed nations. Behind the gleaming skyscrapers, elderly individuals often gather cans and cardboard, a stark sign of persistent disparity. The cost of living creeps upward, with property prices soaring to levels forcing young families into decades-long mortgages. For instance, a typical Toyota Corolla costs around $110,000, 5 times the U.S. price, due to taxes and licensing, highlighting the affordability gap. Thirdly, demographic decline presents a grave concern. The birth rate is alarmingly low, with an average of just over 1 child per woman, placing Singapore among the nations with the lowest fertility rates worldwide. By the year 2030, 1 in 4 citizens will be over 65, creating immense pressure on pension and healthcare systems. Efforts by the government to boost birth rates through various support programs have so far proved ineffective. Conversely, attempting to attract immigrants has sparked resistance among local residents, leading to political repercussions. In 2011, the ruling party's support dropped sharply from 75 to 60%, primarily due to dissatisfaction with immigration policies. The fourth and perhaps most profound threat lies in the nature of Singapore's authoritarian governance. Without genuine political competition or space for criticism, authorities risk overlooking emerging problems and failing to adapt swiftly. The question of leadership succession adds to these concerns, as the long-standing authority of Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore's founding father, set a formidable precedent. As the country faces these complex challenges, its future stability will depend on balancing authoritarian control with the necessity for reform and innovation. His son, now the Prime Minister, no longer wields the same level of influence. The question of who will govern Singapore after the current leadership's eventual departure remains open. The nation's most formidable challenge is the geopolitical tension between the United States and China. While close cultural ties link Singapore to China, over 3/4 of its population are ethnic Chinese. Its economy is deeply intertwined with the West. American investments totaling nearly $428 billion and military cooperation with the United States exemplify this integration. A hypothetical conflict between these superpowers would place Singapore in a perilous position, where any decision to back the United States, align with China, or remain neutral could have severe repercussions. Complicating matters, Singapore's reliance on imported water and food leaves it vulnerable. Approximately 60% of its fresh water and half its food come from Malaysia, a dependency underpinned by a water supply agreement valid for 99 years, expiring in 2061. Recognizing these vulnerabilities, the government is proactively responding, constructing desalination plants, advancing vertical farming techniques, and stockpiling strategic reserves. Military strength is another key pillar. Singapore maintains a formidable arsenal including 170 main battle tanks, 60 F-16 fighter jets, 40 F-15 aircraft, and a recent order for 20 F-35s, ranks that surpass many European nations. Nonetheless, in the event of a large-scale regional conflict, Singapore's small size and dependence on international trade would render it highly susceptible. Singapore stands as a unique social experiment, proof that building an economic haven without extensive political freedoms is feasible. Over 6 decades, the city-state has transformed from poverty into prosperity, forging a model that challenges Western ideals of democracy and development. Its advantages are evident: sixth in the world in gross domestic product per capita, top-tier infrastructure, virtually non-existent crime rates, and exemplary healthcare and education systems. The country has turned scarcity of natural resources into an advantage by investing heavily in human capital and technological innovation. However, this success comes with notable costs. Stringent restrictions on personal freedoms, pervasive surveillance, and severe punishments for minor offenses characterize the political landscape. Dissatisfaction or criticism of authorities can lead to legal action and financial ruin, while the multitude of cameras creates an atmosphere as if every move is monitored. This social contract involves Singaporeans sacrificing certain rights in exchange for safety and prosperity, an arrangement that has largely benefited the populace, enabling many to enjoy a standard of living their parents only dreamed of. Yet, questions about its long-term sustainability persist. As new generations emerge, especially young people raised amid affluence and Western education, their expectations for political participation and freedoms may diverge from those of their ancestors, who endured years of hardship during the nation's early independence. Global trends currently challenge the very foundation of Singapore's unique model. As the world leans toward deglobalization and protectionism, economies heavily reliant on open international trade face mounting risks. The escalating rivalry between the United States and China may compel Singapore to take sides, potentially disrupting its carefully maintained foreign policy equilibrium. Singapore's approach is unconventional. It melds economic liberalism with political authoritarianism, an apparent contradiction that defies traditional expectations. Remarkably, this combination has yielded impressive results in practice, raising questions about whether such a model is a product of Singapore's specific history, or if it could be adopted elsewhere. Could nations like Russia, China, or Gulf states successfully integrate elements of Singapore's strategy? Most critically, one must ask, would people choose to live in a society where personal freedoms are limited in exchange for security? Would you accept paying a fine of $500 for accidentally littering if it meant the streets remained spotless? Singapore functions as a mirror reflecting diverse views. To some, it exemplifies effective governance and the triumph of enlightened authoritarianism. To others, it serves as a cautionary tale, showing how material well-being can lead society to voluntarily surrender fundamental freedoms.